have you ever, like, surprised yourself with your own anger? Or maybe wondered what actually happens when survival requires becoming someone you don't even recognize?
It's an incredibly unsettling thought, right? Feeling like a total stranger in your own skin.
Yeah.
But when you're pushed, past the absolute limits of human endurance, the mind really has to innovate just to keep you alive. And, well, sometimes that innovation looks a lot like a monster.
Wow, yeah. So today we're taking a deep dive into this, pulling from a huge stack of research notes on psychology and philosophy, and we're anchoring all of these concepts in this really dark sci-fi fantasy book called San Vitae, The Awakening.
Right.
And if you haven't read it, the story basically followed as this character, Kurien. He is a Sanite, which is this incredibly powerful, artificially reborn being.
Like a super soldier. It sounds
Yeah,
like.
yeah. And he serves as a conscripted protector to Covenness Myasuchi. They live in this bleak, post-cataclysmic world where survival is just a daily, brutal negotiation.
The world building is just fascinating. But, I mean, the real draw for our analysis today is Curien's literal demon aspect.
Right, because being a Sanite means he carries this, like, secondary monstrous nature inside him.
Exactly. And we are using that supernatural premise to map out something very, very real. We're looking at Jungian shadow theory, the neurobiology of trauma, and the devastating reality of moral injury.
So let's get right into what this demon actually represents, because in the book, it physically manifests, like it literally takes over his body.
Yeah, it's visceral.
It is. But psychologically speaking, Carl Jung would call this the shadow. And I think a lot of people misinterpret the shadow as just a junk drawer for bad thoughts.
Oh, absolutely. They think it's just, a bin of evil.
Right. But reading through our psychological sources, it feels a lot more like a black market of the psyche.
Oh, I love that. A black market is a much better way to conceptualize it, because from the moment we're socialized as kids, society basically dictates which behaviors are legal currency, right?
Like politeness, sharing, being quiet.
Exactly. And then it tells us which ones are contraband. So aggression, selfishness, intense fear, forbidden desires.
But those contraband traits, they don't just vanish.
No, they have massive survival value. They don't just disappear because society outlaws them. Instead, we push them underground into the shadow.
Into the black market.
Right, where they form this autonomous, primitive reservoir of energy.
Which maps, like, perfectly onto Kurien's demon aspect. It physically embodies his repressed rage and his absolute fierce survival instinct.
Yeah, it really does.
And there's this chilling moment in the research where we get a direct quote from the demon. It's tempting Kurien, whispering, "If you release me, you may yet have that life."
That's such a great line.
Right. The shadow isn't just threatening him, it's offering a transaction. It's basically saying, let me run the black market and I'll get you what your polite self can't.
The seductive nature of the shadow is so often overlooked. It promises power, survival, and, well, the fulfillment of suppressed needs.
But the conventional wisdom is to just lock that part away, right? Like, throw away the key.
Conventional wisdom, yes.
Yeah.
But Jungian psychology strongly argues the exact opposite. The goal isn't suppression, it's integration.
Okay, wait, I have to push back on this a little bit.
Go for it.
Because if the shadow is hoarding my most aggressive, selfish, unfiltered impulses,
Right.
how is integrating that a path to psychological wholeness? I mean, if someone has a repressed urge to lash out violently, we don't want them integrating that by actually punching people,
Well, sure. But integration doesn't mean acting out the literal impulse.
Oh, okay. So what does it mean?
Think of the shadow as raw, undirected energy. When you suppress it entirely, it becomes like a pressure cooker. It operates blindly from the dark, which is exactly when you end up snapping at someone out of nowhere or totally self-sabotaging.
Right, because you have no control over it.
Exactly. Integrating the shadow means acknowledging the intent behind the impulse. If your shadow is hoarding rage, it's usually because a boundary of yours is being violated, and your cautious self is just too timid to enforce it.
Oh, wow. So integration is about, like, stripping the aggression of its violence, but keeping the assertiveness.
Exactly. You're recovering the vitality that got locked away with all that contraband. You learn to harness the protective energy of the shadow consciously, rather than letting it hijack you when you're just exhausted.
Hijacking is the perfect word here, because if the shadow is always there, operating the underground market, it really only completely takes over during moments of extreme crisis.
Yes.
And our sources point out that this psychological battle maps directly onto our neurobiology.
It does. The structure of the brain actually mirrors this dynamic almost perfectly. It's often framed as the conflict between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex.
Right, the brain stuff.
Yeah, so the amygdala is our ancient threat detector. It drives the fight or flight response, aggression, fear, basically, pure survival instinct.
So the biological home of the shadow.
Basically, yeah. While the prefrontal cortex, which sits right behind your forehead, is the highly evolved logical center. It governs morality, restraint, long-term planning, social behavior.
It calculates consequences.
Exactly.
And our sources always use these really basic metaphors for this, right? Like the prefrontal cortex is the brakes and the amygdala is the gas pedal.
A very classic analogy.
It is, but honestly, looking at the trauma data we have, it's less like driving a car and more like a municipal power grid during a Category 5 hurricane.
Oh, that's an interesting way to put it.
Right, because under normal conditions, the grid powers everything.
Yeah.
The art museums, the libraries, the hospitals, and the prefrontal cortex is the art museum.
It takes a lot of luxury energy to run.
Exactly. It requires so much energy to appreciate morality and long-term planning. But when the hurricane hits, when severe trauma occurs, the city intentionally cuts power to the museums just to keep the hospital generators running.
The brain is relentlessly efficient. I mean, during a severe traumatic event, what we call chronic allostatic load just completely overwhelms the nervous system.
Yeah.
The amygdala registers a catastrophic threat and aggressively downregulates the prefrontal cortex. It literally cuts the power.
Wow.
Logic, morality, and social consequence are luxuries you just can no longer afford. The brain forces a state of fight or flight dominance because, quite frankly, if you stop to morally evaluate a lethal threat, you die.
And we see this brutal efficiency in Kurien's backstory, right? Because the lore details this agonizing period where he endures 12 years of continuous horrific torture in the Inquisitor's vault.
12 years.
Yeah, completely deprived of light, hope, everything. 12 years is a permanent hurricane.
It is.
So under that level of severe, prolonged trauma, his prefrontal power grid never even had a chance to reset.
No, it wouldn't. His conscious mind, that prefrontal cortex, essentially dissociates just to protect itself from the inescapable agony. When the logic center shuts down, the organism is left with unadulterated survival instinct. And we see real-world parallels to this physiological hijacking constantly. The clinical dossier compares this state to combat veterans or, survivors of prolonged coercive control.
The concept of an emotional flashback.
Yes. When someone with severe PTSD experiences a trigger, it isn't just a bad memory. The amygdala hyperactivates, and the prefrontal cortex goes completely dark.
The museum loses power.
Right. They register a totally harmless current situation as a life-threatening crisis. They react with the shadow, acting out of pure, unfiltered survival before their rational brain can even process the environment. The conscious you is entirely offline.
That is so scary. I mean, it fundamentally shakes the whole concept of identity.
It really does.
Because it means the you that you think of as you like, the polite, moral, rational person listening to this right now, is highly dependent on your environment not being a living nightmare.
Exactly. It's a conditional identity.
So when the power grid fails and the conscious CEO of your brain is just locked out of the boardroom, who exactly takes the wheel?
Well, the sources introduce a fascinating and actually highly effective framework in modern psychotherapy to answer that. It's called internal family systems, or IFS.
Right, IFS.
It's also known as parts work.
And IFS is wild to me because it suggests the human psyche isn't a singular solid block. We are not a monolith.
No, not at all.
We're more like a chaotic corporate boardroom or a family made up of all these multiple interacting parts.
Yeah, and each part has its own perspective, its own memories, its own specific job within the ecosystem of your mind.
Okay, so break down the parts for us.
Sure. So IFS broadly categorizes these into three main roles. First, you have the exiles. These are the highly vulnerable parts of ourselves that hold our deepest traumas, pain, terror, and shame.
And because the pain of the exile is so incredibly overwhelming, the rest of the system basically locks them in the basement so the person can actually function and go to work every day.
Exactly. And the parts responsible for locking them away are called the managers.
The managers. Okay.
Managers are proactive. They are the everyday personas we wear to maintain control, keep us safe, and basically prevent the exiles from ever being triggered.
They're the perfectionists, the caretakers, the rule followers.
Spot on.
Which brings us to, I think, the most dangerous part of the system. What happens when the manager fails? Like when the environment triggers the exile and all that agonizing trauma comes rushing up from the basement.
Well, that's when the firefighters deploy.
The firefighters.
Yes. Firefighters are highly reactive parts. Their only mandate is to extinguish the emotional, overwhelming pain of the exile, and they operate with absolute disregard for collateral damage.
Wow.
Think about a real-world firefighter. They will chop down your antique front door and completely flood your living room just to put out a kitchen fire.
Right, because they don't care about your furniture.
Exactly. They care about stopping the fire.
So psychological firefighters do the exact same thing.
They do. They act impulsively to numb or stop the pain immediately. So in our daily lives, a firefighter might look like suddenly binge drinking or dissociating for hours.
Or lashing out with explosive rage to push people away before they can hurt you.
Yes, precisely.
So mapping this onto Kurien's fractured mind gives us such a profound psychological profile. Because Kurien's everyday persona, the chivalrous conscript who follows the rules, the loyal soldier desperately trying to protect his Covenness Myasuchi that is his manager.
Yes, he is actively trying to orchestrate an environment where he feels in control.
But beneath that manager is his exile. All that profound grief, terror, and helplessness he internalized from losing Myasuchi and being tortured in that vault.
And the moment that exile's pain threatens to flood his system,
his violent, feral demon aspect rips control away.
exactly, the demon is the ultimate firefighter.
Yeah, and it acts with utter nihilism. It doesn't care about relationships or chivalry because its only function is to stop the pain of the exile. And there's this visceral scene in the book that just perfectly captures a firefighter hijacking the system. Kurien completely loses control. He violently attacks his former best friend, Tippin.
It's brutal.
And later, he pins his bonded companion, Sharina, to a wall. He literally pierces her wrists with spears made of his own blood. It's just a horrific betrayal of everything the manager Kurien stands for.
A total violation of his values.
Right. And while he has her pinned, Sharina looks into his eyes and asks what he has to live for. And the demon, staring out through Kurien's face, replies in this hollow voice, "Nothing."
That dialogue is incredibly revealing because the firefighter operates from a place of absolute emptiness. The manager who loves Tippin and Sharina is completely inaccessible in that moment.
Yeah.
The demon isn't being malicious for the sake of evil. It is being ruthlessly utilitarian.
Man, and this is where I really want you, the listener, to think about your own internal boardroom. You know, your firefighter might not conjure blood spears, but maybe it's that urge to completely nuke a relationship the second you feel criticized.
Yeah, that sudden self-sabotage.
Right. It's the part of you that suddenly says, I don't care, when you actually care so much it's tearing you apart.
Exactly.
And if a rogue firefighter can hijack your mind, lock the CEO in a closet, and burn your life down just to stop a moment of pain, are you really the one in control?
It forces us to confront how fragile our conscious autonomy really is, doesn't it?
It really does.
But, you know, the psychological journey doesn't end with the fire. Eventually, the crisis passes, the nervous system regulates, the power grid comes back online, and the manager regains control of the boardroom.
And the manager has to look at the wreckage the firefighter left behind?
Exactly.
Like Kurien wakes up from this demonic blackout in a dilapidated refuse tunnel. He's holding Sharina, and the memories of what his physical body just did start bleeding back in.
The realization must be crushing.
It is. He realizes he acted as an apex predator toward the people he loves most. And the psychological fallout from that realization is just massive.
In clinical terms, we call this moral injury.
Moral injury. How is that different from PTSD?
Well, it's a distinct concept, though they do frequently co-occur. While PTSD is fundamentally a fear-based response to a threat to your physical life.
Like the hurricane.
Right. Moral injury is a profound psychological distress resulting from a threat to your soul or your core identity. It happens when you take actions, or fail to take actions, that violently contradict your own deeply held moral code.
Oh, I see. It's the cognitive dissonance of realizing you are capable of being the monster.
Precisely.
Because Kurien desperately views himself as a chivalrous protector. That manager identity is the only thing keeping him tethered to his humanity. Yet he wakes up realizing he tortured his best friend and assaulted his bonded companion.
Yeah, it's a total fracture of the self.
So how do you integrate that? How do you live with yourself when you become the exact thing you swore to protect people from?
That's where you have to apply existential ethics. It demands that we look at morality not as a static binary of just good and evil, but as a contextual framework. Morality is defined by the choices we make under immense, often impossible pressure.
See, I struggle with this part of the philosophy, honestly.
Why is that?
Because does contextual morality let him off the hook? I mean, he still hurt Tippin and Sharina. Saying, my demon did it, or my firefighter did it, sounds like an abdication of responsibility.
I get why it sounds that way, but it's actually the exact opposite of an abdication. It forces absolute accountability. Existential ethics doesn't excuse the behavior.
Okay.
Kurien embodies what the research dossier terms moral dualism,
Hmm.
which is this historical agnostic idea that humans inherently contain both destructive and compassionate potentials.
Right.
Ancient cultures often depicted this internal conflict through symbolic dual beings, not as literal theological facts, but as psychological metaphors for the human condition.
So the demon isn't a foreign invader infecting him. It is a fundamental, native part of his own nature.
Yes, and healing from moral injury requires holding two incredibly painful truths simultaneously.
Which are,
You have to mourn the profound violation of your morals while recognizing the absolute necessity of the survival mechanism that caused it.
oh,
You have to take responsibility for the wreckage the firefighter caused, while having the self-compassion to understand why the firefighter felt it had to burn the house down in the first place.
that is heavy. So his struggle isn't a simple comic book battle of pure good defeating pure evil.
No, not at all.
It's the grueling, messy conflict between pure biological survival and maintaining personal integrity. When survival requires brutality, the path back to humanity isn't pretending the brutality didn't happen.
Exactly. The consensus across all our sources, from Jung's shadow integration to the neuroscience of trauma to the unblending process in IFS, is that integration leads to healing while suppression leads to pathology.
Yeah.
The parts of ourselves we fear the most, our sudden anger, our fierce, unapologetic survival instincts, they aren't actually demons. They are traumatized, parts of a fractured whole, trying desperately to protect us the only way they know how.
And if we just lock them in the vault of our minds, they stay feral. But if we can look at them, if we can understand the unmet need or the terror they are fighting against, we can actually negotiate with them.
Precisely. And I think it brings us to a final, really provocative question from the philosophy of the self.
Let's hear it.
Throughout this analysis, we've seen that the self is not a single, unified entity. It is a constant, shifting negotiation between competing internal forces.
A boardroom where the loudest, most terrified voice often wins the moment.
Right. So consider this. If your shadow, your firefighter, is willing to break every single moral rule you hold dear just to keep you alive when your rational brain shuts down, who's the real you?
Wow. Is it the manager who makes the polite rules when things are calm and safe?
Or is it the firefighter who breaks every single one of those rules to save your life when the fire actually starts?
That is something to think about. The next time you find yourself reacting in a way that surprises you, or you catch a glimpse of that shadow economy operating in the back of your mind, don't just look away.
No, lean into it.
Investigate it. Because when the power grid fails and survival requires becoming someone you don't even recognize, you might find that the monster in the mirror is the only thing keeping you breathing.